Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Language of Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nighbor. Great to see you. Whether you're seeing me physically live online on a couple different platforms or you're listening in on the podcast, I want to welcome you to the show. Today we have an amazing guest. And if this is the first time that you have been, if this is the first time you've listened to this podcast, the Language of Excellence podcast is designed to help salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs live the language of excellence. And what is that? What that is that's getting you, the listener, the watcher, the right information, the right tools, so you can act on that information and give you the correct outcome that you want, especially as a salespeople, helping your client get the result, get the outcome that they want. That's what the Language of Excellence podcast is all about. And I get to introduce Beth Mastre. She is coming to the show here today. I'm going to be bringing her on after I give her a proper introduction. So Beth Mastre is the Vice President of Sales for B2B Sales and Consulting. Beth's been in sales for over 30 years. She's probably seen a couple changes over the years, I imagine, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit into that. Her contributions to the industry, she really follows and she really leans on organic and authentic conversations. And it's not just about selling widgets. It's truly providing value. And you get that word? Conversation. Conversation means back and forth. She doesn't really want to deal with, or actually she helps a lot of people overcome those silly questions, the tie down questions. Hey, what can we do to get you started today? Like that's all that does is that just leads to friction. She's not excited about that. She wants to truly help people have authentic conversations. She's been in sales for 30 years. It's in her blood. She started with making calls from a phone book. Some of you are like, what is that? What is a phone book? I'd like to say I have one here, but I don't. Selling annuities through a phone book, just paging through the white pages, I imagine, or the yellow pages. Today, she gets to contribute by helping companies with the best. And what she does is helping them be the differentiator with the sales conversation is really what it is. She also stands behind the fact that the salesperson, the sales rep, the sales professional does know more, and they can truly help the conversation, help them get the right outcome. And that leads me to think about Anthony Iannarino's last book about one up, giving value to that prospect that might not know that information. The website that you can best find her on is thesalesblog.com. So let's bring Beth Mastre to the show. Welcome back.
Nick. Hey, thanks. Wow, I love that introduction. I feel like we're done. Like we just checked the box, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to have you on. Last week, I was talking to someone. They've been in sales just a handful of years. So This is the flip side of the coin, where like you got into sales, no cell phones, right?
Oh gosh, no. Actually, I can really embarrass them. Like I had a brick phone. Like when they first came out, I carried that big old brick. I was so proud of that. Now I'm like, can I make my phone smaller?
That's funny. That's funny. So I have a load of questions here. I know we're only going to get to a couple because we don't have a ton of time to talk today, but tell the listeners a little bit like how you got into sales.
You know what? It was sort of by an accident. I really went to school for radio TV, and my husband is actually in that business. And back in the day, they really didn't want to hire a husband and wife. And so like one of us had to go find another job. And thankfully that was me. He made the right decision. He's really talented, but it carried me through a bunch of different jobs. I accidentally ended up in a software sale, which was phenomenal learning, right? And then I kind of passed through a few other, I've done service, I've done other software companies. And, with each of those jobs, I can look back now and I'm like, oh, I know what I needed to learn there. Like those were great. They were hard, but they were great learnings. And, I always say it was sort of an act of God. I ended up meeting Anthony, and now the two of us just kind of do our thing with the sales blog. And really, I love the word you use, friction, because I think, I know in talking to sales leaders all the time, every day, what I find is that they're using this language that causes so much friction. And I don't blame them. What do we do when we bring on people? We say, here's who we are, here's what we do, here's our grade, here's how we can help you, here's our features and benefits. Oh, by the way, look at the logos, right? And you're like, whoa, that was all about me. And that's the friction you're talking about.
Yes. And I used to be in digital marketing, and selling websites. So most companies, they're like, well, how long you've like, what are the natural questions that are asked when you're building on a website? How long have you been in business? What are your profit centers?
Yep.
These are all the things the clients don't want to know.
Right. Oh, exactly. It's available on the internet, right? Why would you have to tell someone when they can Google that?
Correct. But if you can ask a question, leaky roof. Okay, now you're talking my language. Like, you're actually going to help me with an outcome. All right, cool. Where's your phone number? Because I'm going to call you because I have a problem that needs to be fixed, instead of like X amount of years in the industry, AA certified.
Right.
That's
nobody cares. Nobody cares. And that's a commodity, right? So here's the problem. For those people who are listening, if you think about this, when you come in and you say like, oh, I can do that better and I can guarantee these outcomes, or we can do this and we've developed this, right? Guess what? Your competitors coming in, they're going, no, we can do that better. Like, we do it this way. And then it just leaves the buyer very confused. They're like, I don't even know who to believe. So then they go to what? One of two things: either the relationship they like better, or the person lowest price. And there's nothing worse than being bottom barrel, right? You don't ever want to be bottom barrel.
You know what's funny? When you say that, I can do better than they can, and then they come in and I can do better than them. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of my daughters, and they're fighting. No, I touched it first. No, you touched it last. I touched it. Like, totally an elementary conversation, but it's adults doing this.
Right. No, it really is. And, buyers just are so frustrated. There's a survey that came out that said 71% of buyers don't even want to talk to a sales rep because they don't see any value. They can go to the internet, they can get the information, but there's part of the problem. If let's just say, for example, it's an experienced buyer, well, they're looking at things through a lens, and an old lens, likely. They don't have a conversation. So what I would tell, and when you talk to Anthony, I'm sure he talked about one-up, and you go to a doctor because they have a one-up position, meaning knowledge. They just know more than you do. And what I tell every sales leader, your rep actually knows way more than the prospect does. They just aren't having a conversation to demonstrate the things that they absolutely know more that would be so wildly beneficial to the prospect.
As you're talking about that, you know who Andy Paul is?
Oh, I do. Yes.
So I just got his book just yesterday, and he's talking about the things that you're talking about in the beginning of the first couple chapters, is asking just different questions, just using a weird language where he almost felt like sleazy, like, this is what I got to do.
Right.
It goes hand in hand. It's really weird. Like, I was just reading this last night, and now you're talking about it. It's really cool, because between like Jeb Blunt and Anthony and Mark Hunter, and like, it's all of you guys focus on the right language,
right?
Helping the client. It's really, really interesting. So your time in sales, you've seen some ups, you've seen some downs, you've seen technology. All right, let's put you back into your first sales role. What advice would you give yourself today if you went back to your first sales job?
Well, the first thing I would say to myself is, why didn't you appreciate how easy selling was back in the day? That's the very first thing I would say. But if I were to do it now, I think the first thing is, I think when you're young, you're a bit timid, right? You're trying to think like, this person sitting across the table from me is 20 years older than me. How can I possibly know something more? And the truth was, you actually do. And I did. I mean, I did know more than them, because again, as I was saying, like, I was having these conversations every week. I was on a plane all the time. I was sitting in front of people. And so what I didn't take advantage of that I should have is, in all those conversations, I should have looked for one of two things. I should either looked at what was the commonality, like what did everybody want to talk about? That'd be one thing. And what the other thing I would look at is, well, what was the one thing that was really unique? And the reason I say that is, if I, in a week's conversation, somebody wants to talk about the same thing over and over and over again, well, then on the following week, I can call prospects and go, it was really interesting. Last week, I had about 7 different conversations. Everybody wanted to talk about this. I'm curious if it's on your radar. I'd love to share with you how they're thinking about it and how they might think about solving it. Right? I'm an insight provider just from having those conversations, and we get so wrapped up in, and I don't dismiss this. When you're a sales rep, what do you think about? Your quota. Like, I got to sell. Every deal is important, right? Mm-hmm. But if you were just to have a more organic, authentic conversation, it lowers that barrier to entry. And now you have the ability to find out what's important to them. Because if you go down a path of like, you got this pain, okay, let me tell you about how I can solve that pain. you potentially are creating a barrier because maybe it's really not in their initiative. And so it gives you all kinds of heartburn that you didn't mean to create.
So having so what you just said is looking for that commonality, looking for whatever's unique. I think I found myself early on too in the same trap where every conversation was a unique conversation.
Yeah.
If you're in an industry, we'll say, right, we were talking marketing. If you're in marketing, there's only so many objections a business owner is going to have, which tells me there's really only so many problems they're going to have in that area. Right. There should be like 3 to 5 major problems that they have. If you're looking for the trends, you're looking for the commonalities, and you can tie those two together, that instantly gives you the credibility. Like, I was just talking to John down the road. These are his 2 issues. We're talking about the same thing. Do you relate to that? Like, this is happening to John, and you guys are competitors. Like that would be so valuable to see those trends early on.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you are truly an insight provider. So I always say, like, there's some interesting things that you can think about. Like, how do I figure out what's the conversation going to be about? Like, the mistakes your clients are going to make. You're in this conversation like, oh boy, they're already not thinking about this, right? Or what are they overlooking? Going back to that thing of like what lens that they're new and don't know better, experience, but don't have the conversations. And then, what questions should they be asking? They're never asking the right questions. Like I have it come a lot. I have a lot of conversations where a leader will say, I've got a prospecting problem. In the back of my head, I'm like, I'm willing to bet you don't have a prospecting problem, even though he thinks he does, because it's the symptom. But when you whittle down to the root cause, a lot of it just comes down to fear. And it's the fear of, I don't know what to say. It's a fear of rejection. Like when you're young in sales, and it happens even through your career, you're like, I got 2 ways to say something. Oh, I'm on my 3rd time. I can't call him again. I don't have any value. I'm uncomfortable now. But if you could think about all the different things you could talk about that don't even line up with your product, now you have lots of things to talk about. We just got to get them to flip that switch from the off to the on position.
And you're talking about conversation. When a new salesperson is reaching out to a business owner or an entrepreneur, they're thinking like, all right, what am I going to say to them? Like they're only thinking like their conversation.
Right. And when you're new like that, I mean, the big problem is when you're brand new, whether you're young or, have some tenure behind you, the challenge is you don't have the insights. And what I would tell every young salesperson or somebody new is you have to go in and you have to glean internally to people who are, successful leaders. Leaders are my favorite. They have a much wider lens than a sales rep. Sales reps are very narrow, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, I don't know what to do here. But a leader will go like, why aren't they doing that? And it's because they have a wider lens. And so if you're new, you need to go in, and I'd ask them, what mistakes do you see our clients making? What would you say that they overlook? And what questions should they be asking if they're not? Now I've got some things I can talk about, and it gives me the ability to come in and not say, hey, I'd love to learn a little bit about your company. I'd love to share what we do and see if there's not a way we can help you. Instead, if they called and said something like, you know what, there's 4 big changes coming down the way. They're going to happen in the next 18 to 24 months. You don't have to make a decision on them now, but you do need to think about how you're going to start addressing that. And I'd love to share with you what they are and some things you should be thinking about so you have better internal conversations. It's much softer.
Gold, Beth. Thank you for sharing this. If you're watching this or you're listening to the replay, like you can rewind this so you can take those notes. Beth just asked 3 really, really good questions, not just for leaders, but sales reps. Like ask the right questions to really understand who you're helping, because the more that you can put yourself in their shoes, truly in their shoes with the issues they're having, it's so much easier having a conversation. I know it takes a little bit to gain that maturity, because it's like a new salesperson is almost like a baby. Like you really don't know what to say. And the best thing that you can overcome that fear is continue to refine those skills.
Yeah. And you said something that's really interesting. So it's like when we're having a conversation and somebody says, oh, I have this pain, then what do? We run to the solution. Like I can solve it, but I'm going to tell you that I think that there's a gap. Well, I know there's a gap. Your prospect is in one spot, you're in another. And so you just go right into the solution, but they're not ready for it. They don't have enough education for that. So you have to continue the conversation so that you can bring them up closer and closer to you so that they get to this point with you. And then you could say, you know what, there's a couple of ways you can think about handling that. Would it be okay if I share that with you? Because now they're with you. Just because they have a pain does not mean that they're actually ready for the solution.
Correct. They might have just realized it just now from that question.
Right. Exactly.
And it's worth digging into a little bit. It's worth asking, peeling that layer back maybe a couple more times to really see if it's an issue, or it's like, why are we meeting here today?
Yep.
On your LinkedIn profile, you talk about, this is in your about section, you talk about business acumen, insights, and customer-centric value. Can you expand on those a little bit?
Yeah. So Anthony has this framework called level 4 value creation. And it's great for your listeners here because you very quickly assess, where am I at with my customers? So I would say, think about your top 5 customers. So the 3 levels of value have been around forever. They are never going anywhere. And what has really changed is the approach. The only thing that's really left is what I like about your podcast. It's about language. The only thing that differentiates you from your competitors at this point, for the most part, for a lot of companies, is how you talk about things. So the first 3 levels is you have a good offering, they have a good experience with you, and lastly, they get some sort of outcome or return on investment. Those things are never going away. They're always going to be important. The problem with those 3 levels is that they're a commodity. So ultimately, what offering A looks like, and B and C, and maybe get all the way to X, right? They all look the same, so it's very hard. When you're a level 4 level 4 creator, then ultimately you're an insight provider, a problem solver, a future teller, an industry expert. You know things that are valuable to that prospect that can help shape their lens and how they think about the solution. And it takes them out of the, I'm looking at it a certain way, and moves them over here where they go, oh, I just would have never thought about that. Like, that's really interesting. And you ask a good question when someone goes, dang, that's a good question. I got to stop and think about that for a second. And so when you get to level 4, you truly are not selling your company, your offering, your problem solution, right? You're selling like the insights. That's what's valuable.
And you can't be there on day one. It takes time.
It does. It does. It can be relatively fast. I mean, one of my favorite things to do when I talk to leaders is I'm like, well, tell me, what is it that your sales reps are just dying to tell your prospects? And they'll throw something at me, and I will just immediately take it and flip it around into an insight. I'm like, you can't come. I'll give you a real example. I had a client, and he was like, we are losing to competitors badly. And I said, well, interesting. Why is it? And he gave me some reason. I said, well, are you exactly the same? Like, you are, the exact same offer. He goes, oh, absolutely not. He went through a whole laundry list of things. One of the things, it was a security industry. He said, well, one of the things we do differently is we actually blueprint the entire organization. So we know what their high security risks are down to their low. And I said, that's fabulous. You cannot say it to a client that way because they're never going to hear you. I said, what you're going to do instead is we're going to create a checklist. And you're going to call people back and say, listen, we recognize when it comes to security, you got lots of options. We've actually created a checklist because what we're finding is that a lot of companies are shocked when they go to make an insurance claim that they're unable to do it because they didn't have security on this particular part of their business. We'll give you the checklist because we know it'll help you think about your business different, even if there are no next steps for us. And it allowed them to start pulling back those clients and pick up new because they weren't trying to sell them anything. They got a checklist.
And that's a one up.
Right. That's a total one up. You're helping them think about their business. They're getting a strategic outcome.
And if they self-discover that, they know where that came from.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So some people will say to me, like, well, won't they give that to my competitors? Sure. Some of them will. But did they bring them the insight? No. I tell salespeople, you're fighting for mind share. You will continue to make relationship deposits. They're going to keep remembering, oh, do you remember when Nick came? Oh, Nick told me that one too. Oh, we actually have a problem. I'm going to call Nick, right? Because Nick has been thinking outside the box as you're making those relationship deposits.
So if you're a salesperson or a sales manager on here, whether it's a small company or a big company, like some big companies have all these tools that you have access to. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small company or a brand new sales rep. You could literally come up with 5, 7, 12 insights that you could share with your prospects And not every single one has to be related to your product or service. If it falls within the industry, then it's going to be relevant, I would say, right, Beth?
Yep, correct.
Relevant.
Yep.
But if there's going to be a couple things in there that you know that it's going to help guide that process to help them start thinking about what's going to come, right? What's coming up? Like what changes am I going to experience? If there's some kind of technology change or not necessarily technology, but like compliance, there's different things that people have to do just to stay relevant in their industry. When you were talking about level 4, you got my attention. Have you heard of it's like a box? There's like unconscious incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the level 4?
Yeah, I sure do.
So I was thinking about those levels for the prospect, and then those levels for like the salesperson. Right. Because when that level 4, like you're providing that, like, you know that and that's really, that should be the goal of every salesperson, is to know that Yeah. And if you're new, then a lot of times you don't know, or you just don't know you don't know. So imagine having the salesperson and the prospect both know that, hey, the prospect can help me, and the salesperson does know more.
Yeah, that's competency, right? I mean, that's what that is. That is competency. It's interesting. A lot of companies have looked at training historically like it's check the box, right? And we used to think we did knowledge transfer, but now we know it's competency transfer. If we can make the rest of the sales teams and reps competent, you can fly. But they have to have that confidence. And that confidence, I say this all the time. I'm going to say I cannot prove this, but I see it all the time. When you give your team the right language that lowers a barrier to entry, you will solve 80% of your sales problems. Like the tools that they're buying to solve problems are kind of like cart before the horse, right? So when they have the language, then tools become invaluable, because now you're getting them connections and you're getting them all kinds of things that add value. They just got to know what to say.
It creates an exponential result on their results.
Exactly.
Those tools. But it's got to, like, what you're saying is the language is really like the foundation.
Yep, that's exactly right. Because if you get, contacts, but you don't know what to say to them, well, then it's an expensive contact to have to burn, right? But if you know what to say, then the contact information is invaluable.
This is so good. Thank you for sharing this, Beth. This is really, really good. So I have 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
All right. So one here is, you can see I got like some books behind me. I'm a big reader.
Yeah.
You work with Anthony, so that's probably a requirement. I'm guessing.
I was a big reader before I met him. So
yeah. So is there a book or a person that's influenced in your career, and how did they or the book help?
Yeah, it's going to surprise you, because it's not a sales book. It's Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Okay.
I'm so interested in the brain, and I have been for years. I've been reading about the brain because I really believe that your brain can heal you. It can create positive outcomes. And he's had some interesting books. One is You Are the Placebo. And it just goes through the process of people who were very, very ill. And ultimately, they were able to heal themselves through the way that they thought. We get that monkey mind, that chatter. I know I can lay in bed and be like, or I'd be in church and like, I'm putting together all kinds of work lists that I should be doing, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea behind what he talks about is just about the power. And I think we sort of take our brains for granted, and it's really easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole and worry about things. And I just like his approach in terms of what it is, in terms of how much your brain can really create your reality.
Okay. Joe Dispenza. And the title again?
You Are the Placebo.
You Are the Placebo.
Right. He also did Becoming Supernatural, which is the next book in that series, which is great.
I've heard of him, but I've not read any of his books. So thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah.
And anyone that's listening here, I'm going to put that link to that book in the show notes. That way, awesome. If someone's a reader, you don't need to Google search, just click on the link, and then you can find that book. That's the nice thing about the Language of Excellence. We're gonna send you the tools. You just have to click on the link and take some action.
You should probably tell Anthony too. I really love his books. Just saying.
I think that goes without saying.
Okay, good.
Okay, so last question.
Yep.
Our audience is typically salespeople, business owners, and entrepreneurs. So
Okay.
when it comes to sales, how would you, Beth, define the language of excellence?
I would say that the language of excellence in sales is making sure you do the one most important thing that I think gets pushed aside a lot, and that's opportunity creation. We get very busy thinking we're busy or having to put out fires. And I'm not minimizing. I do understand, having been an entrepreneur, I get it. There's lots of things that have your attention, but you don't have a business if you don't have business coming in. And so I would say the language of excellence is about prioritizing, prospecting on a daily basis. And for most people, if you do 90 minutes every day, 5 days a week, you have enough. You have enough. But, they don't even do 90 minutes a month, right? Because it's just intentions are good on Monday. Come Friday, it just hasn't resolved to that same outcome. So I would just say your excellence should be 90 minutes every day.
90 minutes every day.
Yep.
That's really good because you're not asking for 4 or 6 hours.
Nope.
90 intentional minutes.
Right. And that does not mean just like figuring out who I'm calling and doing a little research. No, that's dialing. That is dialing. Pick up the phone. People actually answer the phone these days. Last 2 years have been great for that. From a sales perspective, people answer their phone.
Yes, they do. It has changed, hasn't it, a little bit?
Yeah, it has.
And a lot of, business owners might say they don't want phone call. You know what? They've been, what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't had us reach out to them nearly as much. So they miss us just as much as they miss us. Right.
And if you're creating value, don't call them and say, hey, I just want to tell you about myself, right? Give them something that they can go use. Don't be afraid to give things away. Give away your knowledge. It's the best way to get mind share. Yes.
And you were talking about those insights. So if you're a salesperson on here or a sales leader, you got a team of people, what insight are they giving them? Because if it's, hey, I'm just calling, when you got to use the word just in your phone call, you've not prepared.
Exactly.
So remove the word just.
Yes.
I am calling you.
Right.
I want to help you.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you for that definition. I love that. Prioritizing 90 minutes of intentional income producing activities. What is the best way to have people find you online, Beth?
Probably the best way is LinkedIn, because it's just an easy way. If you just Google my name, Beth Mastre, you'll find, I'm probably the only one there.
Probably.
Yes.
Yes. So if you're listening to this, her last name, Mastre, Mastre. Yep. Look her up, reach out to her, follow her. She helps so many organizations. And if you want to learn, you can learn from her. There's also going to be some tools that I'm going to be adding into the show notes as well, referencing the sales blog. So whether you're a sales leader or you're a sales producer, it's going to help you. Take the time, click in those show notes, check them out. And we want to help you live the language of excellence. The best way we can do that is giving you the tools and then you using the tools. Thank you so much for the interview here today, Beth. It was a blast getting to know more about you, and look forward to maybe the next interview down the road.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Nick. It was a lot of fun. I hope people found value.
Thank you, Beth.
All right. See ya.